the sales and operations planning during and after COVID. Over to you, Rushir.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As the topic suggests, we will talk about the sales and operations planning process in the current context. And we will also talk about what are the business imperatives that we can address and where it makes sense to have a powerful analytics and planning application like Anaplan to support the decision making for any particular organization. Okay. All right. So I'm sure many of you are able to recognize Neo here trying to dodge the bullets in the matrix. Our situation today, I think, is pretty much similar. This COVID thing happened out of the blue, and then because of all the implications of that in terms of lockdown, in terms of infections, travel bans, etc., there are bullets firing on all aspects of the business that we deal with on a daily basis. So we'll talk about the COVID imperatives, and then we will also talk about some business value levers. Essentially, these levers are the keys that you need to turn to really manage the situation, withstand the current situation, and then recover and thrive going forward. And then we'll also see how Anaplan helps you do all of those things efficiently and in a very, very effective manner. And then we'll have a Q&A session. Okay, so let's get started. Today, like I said, there are bullets firing on all directions. We are looking at a demand, huge variability on the demand side. Suddenly the demand vanishes because there are lockdowns. There's nobody buying anything. Once we started opening up, we started looking at workers' safety and their schedules, even for the essential businesses. And then the network management, because there are transportation curves. It's difficult to ship products, so supply chains are getting impacted across the globe. And then we are looking at supply-demand balance, because you are getting hit on both supply and demand side. And what does it imply in terms of the overall financial performance for the business, in terms of cost, as well as in terms of cash flows and liquidity? And I think leverage, being a leverage business in today's scenario, is a extremely difficult situation to be in. Okay. Now, I look at the situation from three perspectives. One is we need to respond to the current situation as it is, because there's really no way to avoid it. Okay? So you have to look at updated forecast where the shift in consumer behavior in terms of people, working from home, not being able to travel to offices. So a lot of CBD across the globe are kind of, barren and vacant as we speak. So what happens in terms of the demand for all the businesses which are operating in those areas is a big question mark. And then from a supply planning standpoint, we are looking at production risks, because you cannot have the same headcount numbers that you are operating with on a regular basis because of the social distancing norms. And then, of course, what does it mean in terms of your response buffers, inventories? How do you resolve surpluses and stockouts? Because what's working in the current scenario is essentials, but most of these essentials are actually also having a shelf life as one of the constraints. Now, once we figure out how we want to respond to this, we need to start putting in place things that will help us recover faster and stronger. And there are things that we could do, or we need to start looking at right now, because I guess the volatility is here to stay. So we need to look at probably regression-based forecast. which is more driven on consumer insights and not just historical statistical forecasts. We should look at capacity and production management between demand lumps that we see, and similar implications for the raw material side. How do you do your inbound material stocking strategy, and then what does it mean in terms of the lead time, which have gone longer and so on. And going forward, what it would also mean is to look at demand sensing based on consumer behavior as a default capability to have within the organization. And then we need to have a very, very advanced digital backbone that will help us provide analytics and planning insights that we need to run our business, because uncertainty, as we say, is the only constant, and it keeps increasing over a period of time. Okay. So moving on, these are the value levers that we typically talk about in a business context. So let's start with why a business exists. A business exists to generate economic profits. Essentially, another word for that is generate value. There are two ways to, and we are talking here specifically from a product organization. It can be consumer product, it can be industrial product, any product. Okay. There are two ways to increase economic profit. You can look at your capital allocation, which is further broken down into capital deployment and the cost of capital. You can look at increasing your net operating profit after tax, which is essentially the free cash flow that a business generates. Okay. And then within that, there are two options we can look at. One is to improve profits in terms of either maximizing revenues or increasing revenues, or reducing the manufacturing cost. And then the other is in terms of the overheads or the operating cost, which we can look at by reducing selling costs, distribution costs, admin, R&D costs, etc. Okay. Now, at an operational level within an organization, these things further break down into things that our colleagues or our staff or the people within the organization having different roles and responsibility deal with on a daily basis, right? So when we look at price, volume, market shares, typically we are talking about the sales and marketing organizations here. And some of these things we will see in the tool as we move forward, as to how a tool will allow you to bring all of these together and then derive insights that will really impact the business in a very, very positive manner. And then on the manufacturing side, we are looking at material cost, labor, some of the things we talked about before in terms of supply side dynamics, production dynamics that COVID and the resulting situation is throwing at us. Looking at sales productivity, distribution cost in terms of schedules, transportation modes. What does it impact in terms of network? Do you have certain lanes which are not available anymore? Do you need to move to faster modes because the lead times have increased? So all of these things, as you look at, are really important in terms of the operational levers. And when we look at it purely from a financial standpoint, then we are talking about payables and receivables. So you have the option to increase your payment terms in terms of payables and then try to recover the receivables ahead of time. A couple of ways you could do that is, you could give cash discounts, you could give, just COVID discount, if you want to call it, and then try to have people pay you earlier, which helps you with the liquidity cushion that you need, because all your other costs are going up and the revenues are going down. And then on the working capital that is locked up in terms of the finished goods, raw material, and work in progress inventories. And then at some level, when we are looking at the holistic perspective and a much longer term time frame, we would need a cushion in our balance sheet to help us through the time till we are able to come to again a positive and growing cash flow. So a lot of companies you hear today would be raising capital, either debt or equity, rights issues, etc. So that's where it impacts. Okay. Now this is a typical organization functional map, so to say, and what Anaplan essentially allows you to do is to not just look at transaction data, to not just look at quantitative data. It also allows you to bring in qualitative insights and then create variables around from those qualitative insights and then use in your budgeting, planning, forecasting, and analytics. Okay. So today's focus as we are going through this is on sales and operations planning process, which is essentially you look at the forecast, you look at the marketing product life cycle, which gives you the consensus demand plan, and then it goes through financial planning, reconciliation, and then the executive process. We'll probably see a little bit of HR related implication and simulation on the work center or the factories in terms of the labor outlook. Okay. All right. So typically, let's say sales forecast and reporting leads you to demand planning, but the demand planning linked to revenue modeling and forecasting is typically missing, right? So while you have sales commissions on the sales side, what does it impact in terms of salary planning and headcount? So those are typical data that reside in different parts of the organization, and most likely these resides in Excel sheets. A portion of that is in the transaction system, a portion of that is in different Excel sheets. So Anaplan allows you to connect these things together because of the technological background, the backbone that we have as a hyperblock engine. Okay, moving on. So problem today that we have, we will look at what we can derive as an insight from the volume, portfolio share, variability, etc. And then we'll try to see what are the levers that Anaplan enables you to make decisions around portfolio rationalization, right? So we all understand the big boom in terms of the economy happened because people wanted more choice and then companies went ahead and provided those choices. But today, when we see shrinking business across and the shrinking activity across, what it drives us towards is focusing on the core. So when we are talking about focusing on the core, how do you now implement it within a business scenario? So there are various things that we will look at in a short while. We can look at volume trend. So if you have certain products, so here, if you see this chart from a portfolio standpoint, you will look at sales and profits as one attribute. Then you will look at just the spread of the portfolio in terms of number of SKUs. And then you will see what is the working capital locked up in terms of the inventories. And this is a typical, stack that would usually come out with any normally operating organization. So as you can see, there are certain products here, 5%, which give you maximum sales and or profits. And they have a relatively decent share of inventory. So this is good business. But as you keep going up in terms of either the profit profile or the inventory, you will see there are inefficiencies here, right? So if I look at this, for example, this section here is just 2% of the profits, has 49% of the SKUs and 36% of inventory. So there's definitely something that you want to look at here, and so on. Now, while we look at things on the demand side here, we also need to look at the supply side. How do we do that? When we are trying to forecast demand, there are two things that we look at. One is what we call as the forecast error, and the other is what we call as covariance. Forecast error is essentially your ability to estimate demand. And covariance is what the demand is statistically telling you. Okay, so it's the variance of the demand with respect to the trend, seasonality, etc. And we'll see some statistical models as we go along. Now, the logical insight here is, if you cannot forecast demand, okay, if your ability to forecast is low and your, let's say, your demand variability is high, then your decoupling point should be upstream. What I mean by decoupling point is, where will you manufacture and keep ready stock waiting for the demand to hit. So here it should be as upstream as possible. Try to keep build to stock at an assembly level. And as the demand variability keeps going low, you can move forward in terms of supply chain more closer to customers and distribution centers. Right? On the other extreme, if you look at this matrix here, when your demand variability by itself is low, but you are also able to forecast the demand well or reasonably well here, then it makes sense to operate on a reorder point pull basis, right? Because you know what the demand is going to be, so you can move into manufacturing schedules at the back end, which will help you optimize your production center resources. Setups will be reduced and so on. Now, this is a box where what we call as the risk-reward trade-off box, where the demand by itself is variable. This typically you will see towards the start or the end of the life cycle. And your ability to forecast is also low because your error is high. So these quadrants, these four, you will typically look at strategy, whether it will be an assemble to order, procure to order, build to stock to component. So you will just keep components. For example, here the last quadrant, if the product is low risk and high risk, essentially linked to the life cycle of the product. So if you know that your product is going to phase out over a period of time and it's already planned, then you can just keep certain components and allow it to deplete over a period of time. So these are the things that from an operational strategy point we can do in the current environment. And now we'll shift to the Anaplan application so that you are able to see how we will derive those insights. All right. So let's start with the, we start with the statistical forecast. Okay. So you start with the history review first. You will look at how your particular products, and Anaplan allows you to model, all the hierarchies across. So before I go further, let me give you a background. So this is a model, small model that we have created. It represents a photovoltaic business in the US, and we have certain products like monosilicon, soft panels and hard panels, and then you have string ribbons, building, etc. And so we start with historical review. If there are outliers, we can we can address those here. And there are times, for example, if you see this particular number, it's abnormally high, and it was a one-time buy, because institutional buy which came in because of a subsidy or etc. Then we have the option to change this here, right? So Anaplan. So let's say if we want to change it here, August 12 is here. So we can enter a value. We don't agree with this 934. We know it's not the right number. So let's say we reduce it to 750. And then immediately it tells you you need to put the reason code, unexpected demand surge, and so once we do that, we are able to address the history. Okay. So as you can see, it's very user friendly and very quick in terms of your ability to simulate things on the fly. And then similar thing we can do in terms of the outlier analysis. So once we see the demand history for a particular product, we have the option, we can choose how we want to smooth the outliers. So here you can choose interquartile range, or you can choose standard deviations. And then it will basically give you, if you're looking at, let's say, 2 standard deviations, it will tell you what are the data points which are out of whack, and then you can override it. And then we have option to create a seasonality profile, which again we can create here. We can have standard profiles like what you're seeing here, which is based on history, or you can also do a custom profile. And then we are able to see or slice and dice the previous 5-year history, and we are able to see the descriptive, descriptive attributes of the statistics that we have currently right now. You can do the mean, median, MAP. So typically, if you look at other planning applications, these things reside somewhere inside the black box. Right? It's extremely difficult to respond quickly and then try to do multiple things in a situation like what we are in right now. So this is where it becomes a far more powerful tool, because it's it's ready, it's handy, and then you can really use. You can merge theory and practice, and all the variables are accessible quickly. And then we get into forecast algorithms. So what the tool does is it has multiple forecasting methods, smoothing, seasonal smoothing, etc. So it will forecast using all the statistical techniques, and then based on the MAP or the error profile, it will also pick and choose which one is the best method for generating forecast for this particular product. So for example, here this profile is linear regression, but we know that multiplicative decomposition is the best fit for this particular product. So let's see what happens if it changes to multiplicative. So there, as you can see, you are able to forecast. Now, the flexibility and the power in terms of being able to really model and run simulations on the business is one of the things that is facilitated by this particular tool. Okay. So once we are done with this, you choose what method it is, and then yeah, we already saw seasonality profile. So once you're done with the statistical forecast, that's when the consensus planning process starts. We start looking at the statistical forecast, and once we look at the statistical forecast, we also have the option in terms of what are the trends, what are the various parameters for the forecasting methods that we can see, and then we get the forecast for future. 2015 and 2016, and this is your profile. Okay. Once we're done with this, you also have your marketing team, which will come in. Now, take note, they are usually dealing with market shares and brands, so they are operating at a slightly higher level here. So they will put in their inputs, and just as a information. Each of these things that you see are configurable based on the roles, responsibilities, access, privileges, etc. So once marketing comes in, they will do their thing. They will review. They will look at current prior year actuals, pre-prior year actuals, and so on. Compare the numbers over the years, and then if they want, they can actually input a particular number as well, which becomes the final number that we keep. And then in terms of the product life cycle, we have the option. You can just add a product here, and then give an option in terms of what brand it belongs to, what is the name, what is the effectivity date, how long, which month it will start, and so on. And it adds up the implications of that new product that you have added. You will put in what is your expected unit sales, what is the expected selling price, to forecast, to link this new product volume to your revenue forecast. Okay. And we can put an estimated cost here. And then same way you can manage your product end of life. So you can see, so this is not something that we want to do end of life, but let's say if you wanted to do end of life, you will be able to see that the demand drops for this particular product. And then we have the option to put in dates. When does it start? So let's say, for example, I want to start it in November 14 or August. August 15. So we can go So here you see, if you decide on a particular phasing for that particular EOL, you will be able to forecast till that point and then reduce the demand after. Okay. Now, couple of things here. When we want to look at, going back to the discussion we were having earlier from a portfolio strategy standpoint, what you see here is a table which allows you to create those matrices that we talked about. So for example, here you have, let's say if I want to see a matrix of which are my high volume and high variability products and which are my low volume and low variability products, I can define a cutoff here, and then it it gives me split of my portfolio. And then here we have a 2x2 matrix, but you can create a 3x3 matrix as well in terms of high, medium, low, and so on. Okay. And then we also have the ability, because we are talking, we have all the data here in Anaplan, we can look at the product ranks in terms of cutoffs. If you want to do a 10, 30, 60, you can do this. It'll give you the sales in terms of the dollars, then the profile of, the count of SKUs in terms of your ABC classification and so on. Okay. And then similarly, we can do product ranking. So it will give you based on, let's say, if you want to do a long tail distribution analysis of your demand, you can do rank sort based on the sales dollars or in terms of the units. Okay. So once we are done with this, with the consensus demand plan, we look at production planning. So what is the implication of that? And then here again, it links back to the product rank settings. So whatever we decide in terms of the things that we want to cut off, we can look at those. And then implication of these supply plans on the plant labor outlook is something we can do. There is an option that you can create again here. You can create an aggressive base or conservative scenario in terms of your manpower, and the numbers will automatically adjust. Okay. Going to the working capital part in a sales and operations planning workflow, we can see here what is my typical inventory profile. There are 3 plants here, US, America, EMEA, etc. So if you want to see here, you will see other geographies. For this particular product, you can also see this at a higher or lower level of hierarchy and so on. Again, there are links here. So every time you are looking at any particular number or information or insight, then you also have, you can build or configure the various things handy that you need to look at, which becomes extremely difficult in a normal operating environment, because these are different Excel worksheets. Sometimes the formulas don't work, or just the worksheets become so huge and unmanageable. On the sourcing side, we can look at what is my sourcing for the 3 different plants, what is the volume which is getting allocated. Each of these things then, so allocation decisions here will reflect into the sourcing plan. And then we also have the option in terms of inventory segmentation from a manufacturing standpoint, the right side of the grid in the presentation, if you recall. So we can do, based on the rank and the demand variation, we can do a ABC and XYZ matrix here. And then we will be able to see what are the products. And similarly on the SKU count, we can do corresponding to these particular cutoffs that we want to see. Okay. And then once we are through with this, basically, then it comes to the top level process that all of us are familiar with in terms of going through the demand review. So this gives you your consolidated demand review. It gives you the statistical forecast summary at product category level or the brand level. And it, as you see this, there are capabilities here, like once you select this, this automatically gets selected and so on. And the other part that is useful, when you're looking at a tool like Anaplan, which is actually very, very user friendly, these formats stay, right? You don't lose your information, you don't lose these things. There are no errors, and the what do you call it? The updation of the information in these formats is instantaneous because it's a cloud platform. So, looking at consensus demand inventory units, what is the implication of that? Your inventory profile comes in here. And then here you really have a consolidated view of demand and inventory. Now, when we look at supply review, we are looking at the manufacturing or the supply side of it. We have the finished good dollars here. We have, what is my production plan? All of these things are interlinked with all the other data that we are looking at. With that, we go into pre-SNOP, where we look at the financial informations. So all these numbers, whatever we have done up in terms of either simulations or putting inputs from the field, from marketing, etc. All of these come together here with the projected financial impact of your numbers. So when we look at forecasts, you will be able to see the capacity, the finished goods, raw materials on the plant side. You will be able to see the dollars in terms of the financial budgets versus what is coming out as consensus revenue forecast. Okay. So this is one of the things that is very, very useful to immediately look at. And as you can see here, we can simulate certain things here. So let's say if I say, guys, you were saying 9,000 run rate for 3 months. I don't think that's going to happen. So let's bring it down to 7,500, and you immediately see the impact of that here, right? And then it's as simple as really copying and pasting in terms of working with the applications. And then we get into executive SOP, where you're looking at really the top level, and then the various numbers are coming together. It tells you what is your forecast value add in terms of different people forecasting, and then how does the accuracy improve over a period of time. And then you can trigger actions and business decisions in terms of what needs to be done. So there are a couple of other things that I have built in today to again support the things that we are looking to do. So here we have an option to do safety stock scenarios. You can do safety stock adjustments, aggressive, so you will have less inventory, conservative, you will have more inventory, and then this reflects in the inventory plan that you have. Okay. And then there are a couple of other scenarios we can simulate here as a leadership team. We can look at what is the implication of all of the scenarios that we have on what are my sales, COGS, units, gross margins, etc. So all of these charts will update automatically. And the source of all these things is really the numbers that you have, we have come up. So you can look at these, and then on the inventory and production scenarios, again, you can look at it by product location and the scenario type that you have. So we can go a level up. As you can see, all of it will change, and then you want to see the conservatives, so it will reduce the production time. Okay. And here you have certain capacities scenarios in terms of aggressive, base, conservative. There, there are things we can do. Like for example, your labor is not coming in and you are a labor intensive industry. So obviously, an aggressive strategy is something that you will want to look at. So what it means is you will be reducing the capacity, but you will probably manage with either outsourced capacities because you are overflowing your reduced capacity here, or you will do overtime, etc. So it kind of really links, everything together as you have seen. So let's see where we are on the time. We are 11:42. So this would be the last one. So here we are looking at the total working capital locked up in the inventory. And like what I said before, once you are done with the simulation of scenarios in terms of production, in terms of demand, in terms of capacity, etc., you will, there are things that you can also do around your working capital. So you can have safety stock strategy here, which will, once you change, let's say, so it automatically adjusts and then gives you what it implies in terms of the dollars. Okay. And this is the inventory plan. So that's pretty much it in terms of, given the situation, what we are essentially talking about here is a very, very rapid and agile response. And I think the way we have run the business so far, we really need a dynamic or let's say a big overhaul in terms of the perspective going forward, because the uncertainty is here to stay and the uncertainty will keep increasing. So you really need powerful tools which are able to connect various levers within the organization and allow the leadership to make really fast and agile decision, which will help sustain the business through the troubled times. Okay, so that was a brief on the sales and operations planning process. Now we have covered the demo. As part of the presentation, we are also offering, the audience here an option where they can take a 1-week challenge. They can work with us. You can, well, this is the sales pitch part. So you can give us, a model or the data that you are working with. We can have a virtual consultation, and then you will be able to, we will be able to create that model very, very quickly in the Anaplan application. And one of the things I want to highlight here is Anaplan as a tool is a platform, and it's more like, think of it like a Roblox studio or a Minecraft studio or pure and simple Lego blocks. So you are able to, create your own dimensions. You are able to create your own attributes. As you can see, a lot of these things are needed in the current environment, and there are very few tools, the standard applications, which allow you to do that. So what we'll do is we'll do a very quick reconfiguration, and then we'll be able to show you your data, your business model in the tool, so that you are able to look at and validate the application. Okay, so I'll stop here, and then we can get into a question and answer, because we just have, I think, 15 more minutes. Yeah. So feel free to ask questions on the tool, on the operational part of it, or even on the modeling constructs. Right? So anything is welcome. Over to you, Joseph.
All right. Thank you so much, Rushir, for that compelling and informative discussion. You know what, Rushir, I really admire your discussion, and I learned a lot, most especially during the online demo, right? Now, we are very excited to go ahead and proceed with our Q&A. So again, for those who just recently joined, please feel free to send your inquiries and type it into the question box in your go-to webinar panel. Now, we will now take some questions. So it looks like we have one question from Abish. It's Abhishek Saran. So he asked that my organization already uses Anaplan for demand and financial planning. Can Anaplan help us with the capacity planning and production and distribution scheduling? Rashir?
Yes, absolutely. So, like you saw, various parts of the functional groups within an organizations are, and we have many clients where we are actually having an integrated production planning, demand planning, which links to all the financial forecasts. It's very easy and very powerful in terms of how it helps the organization. So yeah, absolutely, that can be done.
All right, that's great. So anything else? Everyone, please feel free to ask Rashir if you have questions. Just want to ask this, Rashir. After the implementation, what level of forecast accuracy is seen typically?
Okay.
In Anaplan?
So there are two aspects of forecast accuracy here, right? So one is a statistical forecast that the tool will generate based on the history. So the what do you call it? The accuracy of your history will be a big driver for the future statistical forecast. Now, having said that, what we encourage and what we build in as part of the typical forecasting use case will be where we will provide you with opportunities to, like you saw in the demo also, you will have opportunities to put comments, qualifiers, and then you will also have an opportunity to correct the history over a period of time. So once you work on that statistical forecast in future with a corrected history, then your future forecast becomes more accurate, right? So it's typically a journey and it's kind of a self-learning loop, so to say. Once you start with it, you would definitely hit a big jump initially, and then from that time onwards, it will keep improving as the history corrects, the future forecast improves, the history corrects again, the future forecast improves, right? So it's like a learning model.
I see. All right. So here we have another question from Vaibhav Agrawal. Does the tool allow us to have root cause analysis? For example, sales depends on various factors like demand, inventory, marketing. So sorry. Can the software help us to know where exactly and how much the change is coming from?
Absolutely. So what we can do is, in that particular scenario, you will want to try to, again, it's like running a business is like driving a car. You have your dashboard in front of you. The dashboard tells you what speed it is, what RPM it is, and your rear view and side view mirrors will tell you. So all of these things are very, very specific to a business case, and subject to your business drivers, we can build those variables which will be consolidated into one view. So you will be able to see, my sales are down, but then you also see a stock out, right? So you can put those two measures or metrics together in one dashboard if you really want to look at it. And then you can also compare the inventory in terms of the front end and back end. So let's say there was a stock out in the distribution center, but the plant had a finished goods inventory, right? So if you're looking at these three things together, you know that there was a problem with the delivery. Could be, issues with the lanes, transportation, etc. So that's how really we can bring in the different, your operating views, so to say, and then be able to do a very quick root cause analysis.
All right, so thank you so much, Rashir. Here we have one question from Shubham Shah. As you said it, as a cloud platform, can you elaborate on how Anaplan ensures data security? As you know, corporate data comes under high confidential category.
Absolutely, right. So there are two ways to look at data security. One is just the application itself, and the platform is very, very secure. But in terms of just working with the data within an organization, to give you an example, if you see any particular worksheet in Anaplan or dashboard as we call it, I can lock a particular cell for a particular user in many ways. Either they can see it, they may not be able to see it. They can see it, but they cannot edit it, and so on. So it's a very, and because the DNA of the application is such, and then a lot of our clients are large corporations who deal with very sensitive financial information. These things are right there up from start of the company itself. So it's absolutely secure, and within the organization there are multiple layers of security and access controls that we can build in from a user standpoint.
All right, security and access control is really a must here. Rushir from Gautam Raha Gangadharan, how does Anaplan integrate with the base ERP system, both in terms of getting data for the analysis, and once the plan is finalized, is there a reverse link with the ERP in terms of executing the necessary transaction?
Right. So this is more relevant from a supply chain use case, as I see it. So typically you will extract your existing inventories, on hands, new deliveries, purchase orders, etc. You will do the plan for the coming buckets or coming periods, and then you will push the firm plans into the system back. So in terms of connecting with the other applications and or other databases, Anaplan is very flexible. We are actually source agnostic, so we can connect with anything. We can even connect to multiple sources together, which can be a database, it can be an Excel sheet, it can be a text file. So all of those things can come together in one model. So we understand that, and that's why we call it connected planning, because not everything can reside in a transaction system like an SAP or an Oracle. Right? So that's where it has already been built in such a way that you are able to connect seamlessly with any kind of data source.
That's great. Well, Rushir, Vibor Gard asked, what is the underlying tech that is used to generate forecasting models? Is it along the lines of machine learning tech?
Okay, so it's a let me say it's a deep question. It can have a long answer by itself. But the basic technology is, in terms of we go back to core statistical modeling, and what Anaplan does or helps you with is it has certain features and certain functions, so to say formulas and stuff that you can work with to create your model. Okay, so we really go down to the level of details in terms of what are your alphas, your betas, your standard deviations, all of those things. So we can go down, to that level, start working with the basic historical information, and then build a statistical model as you go. So in many ways, it really elevates the people capability maturity within an organization also once we go in and implement. So in terms of technology, it's really, there are certain proprietary functions that we can use, but essentially building bottom up within the tool.
All right. Well, Rushir, we have one question from Abhishek Saran. Does SCANOMI have a team in India?
Yeah, we can take care of any requirements once as and when we come into a discussion about whether you are interested to do modeling and you also want to go ahead and explore Anaplan as a solution for your organization.
All right. Next, we have here last question, I guess. Oh, so we have from Pramod Moharana. How much will be approximate cost of this software, the Anaplan one?
It depends. I mean, it's a difficult to answer just off the bat, but it depends on what kind of user profiles, what kind of how many users, what is the size of the organization, what is the complexity that we are configuring, etc. But I mean, those are again dependent on the use case, the client, how big is the scale, and so on.
I see. And
no ready number.
And it is also customizable depending on the needs of the company, right? Of the organization.
Correct, absolutely. But as a ballpark, just trying to give you a number, because so one of the benefits of Anaplan as a cloud platform is the companies do not need to invest in hardware. Okay. And then it's a subscription model. So it's a pay per user per month kind of a thing. Depending on the user profile, the cost will vary. But so in the long run, it actually works out significantly less in terms of doing a big bang, out of the box application, because here we actually train the customer in terms of their resources who will build and operate the model going forward. There is no programming required to build, what you just saw. So that's the power of Anaplan. You can build your own use cases, you can build your simulation worksheets, and then just work with it and keep improving as the business changes. So no additional money spent on consulting. If you really want to change a form in SAP or Oracle, you have to pay a few $1,000 there, right?
And it is truly cost efficient, right?
Yeah.
All right. So we have here a question from Mary Permil Arolado. She asked, can Anaplan accept web services to push transactionals like posting to an ERP system like SAP? SAP?
Yes, Mary, we can talk about that and we can work on the options there.
All right. So that's it. It looks like we have covered all of your questions, everyone. So if we don't get your question during today's webinar, we will be sure to follow up afterward. No worries, Rushir, our speaker, and we'll address your questions. So no worries, kindly send your details or your questions at Rushir's email, right? It's rushir.gupta@scanomi.com, or you can go directly send your inquiries to our senior account executive, Alex Lopez, at alex@scanomi.com. So Rushir, is there anything else you wanted to cover up before we end the session? I'm keen to know more about the opportunity, the available, this one that you're sharing, available for the various 5 customers.
Yeah.
Forward,
I mean, so like what I said before, if you really want to experience and then have a first-hand feel of how the things would look in your particular context of organization and its data and drivers, feel free to reach out to Alex, and then we can get on to a demonstration and a proof of concept, which is customized for you, and which will help you really see the flexibility and the power that Anaplan brings to the table.
All right. So if you are interested, guys, you can send your details and your interest to our senior account executive, Alex Lopez, at alex@scanomi.com, right?
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a good day.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your time spent with us this morning. We appreciate you guys being here. No worries, you will receive the webinar recording through your email. And if you have further questions, you can send them directly to our speaker. Thank you so much, Rushir Gupta, at rushir.gupta@scanomi.com, or to our senior account executive, Alex Lopez, at alex@scanomi.com. Thanks again for joining. My name is Joseph, and we will see you next time. Have a great one.
Thanks, Joseph. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.